All right, if you work in MEP and fire protection, you see two labels on almost everything, UL and FM. Now, they might look kind of similar, but trust me, the difference between them can literally make or break a project. More than that, it can affect its safety and whether it can even be insured. So let's dive in and get this cleared up once and for all. Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at what these two marks of trust actually are. Then, we'll get into the huge difference between safety and insurability. We'll pinpoint the projects where one is absolutely mandatory, and then we'll walk through how you check for it right there on site. After that, we'll cover the serious consequences of getting it wrong and wrap up with what all this means for you and your professional liability. So let's start at the very beginning. What are these two certifications that pretty much define the reliability of our fire protection systems? Okay, first up, you've got UL, which stands for Underwriters Laboratories. The easiest way to think of UL is as the baseline for safety. They work in a controlled lab, and they're asking a pretty simple question. Is this product safe for a person to use under normal conditions? It's all about making sure it meets basic electrical and mechanical safety standards. It's super important for sure, but it is just the first piece of the puzzle. And then there's FM, or Factory Mutual. Now, these guys are playing a totally different game. FM isn't just a lab, they're an insurance and risk engineering company. They're not just asking if a product is safe. They're asking, will this thing prevent a catastrophic multi-million-dollar loss when a real fire breaks out? Their tests are brutal because they're designed to mimic real-world disasters. They need to know that a product doesn't just work, but that it will actively save the entire facility. Okay, so let's dig into that a little deeper, because this is the core difference that every single engineer, inspector, and project manager has got to understand. This is where the rubber really meets the road. You know, what's so great about this slide is how it just lays it all out. UL protects the user from the product. FM protects the facility and its assets with the product. You see the difference? UL will confirm a valve won't burst under normal working pressure. That's great. But FM confirms that same valve will operate exactly as it should during the intense heat, the massive pressure, and the high water flow of an actual fire. So here's the bottom line. UL means it's tested to be safe. FM means it's insured against a disaster. So, knowing that, when does this stop being a simple choice? At what point does FM approval become an absolute, non-negotiable part of the contract? For anyone working on big, high-stakes projects, this slide is your Bible. If you're on a Saudi Aramco or Royal Commission project, or you're building a petrochemical plant, a massive warehouse, or a data center, the financial risk is just way too high. For these clients, UL by itself is a non-starter. They demand FM approval because their number one priority is preventing catastrophic loss. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? This isn't a suggestion or a nice-to-have. It's a mandate. For these specific high-risk projects, if a component is critical to fire safety, we're talking pumps, main valves, the heavy hitters, it must be FM approved. There is zero wiggle room here. All right, enough theory. Let's get practical. How do you, as the engineer on the ground, make sure that the material that was delivered is the material that was specified? This is your single most important checkpoint. So, picture this. You're on site. A truck has just dropped off a pallet of new materials. What do you do next? This simple question has to be answered with a strict procedure, because getting this right now, will save you from massive headaches later. Here is your 4-step checklist. It's simple. Step 1, find the metal nameplate. Don't trust stickers, don't trust the box, find the plate. Step 2, put your eyes on the UL mark and that very distinct FM diamond logo. If the spec says FM, both have to be there. Step 3, read the exact model number on that nameplate. And finally, step 4, and this is the one people always forget, you have to take that model number and confirm it matches the one on the approved material submittal and the FM certificate. Nothing gets installed until it passes this 4-point inspection, period. And this just shows you exactly what a pass and a fail looks like. On the left, everything's perfect. The model number on the nameplate is identical to the one on the certificate. But on the right, you see the classic failures. The model numbers don't match. The FM mark is missing where it's supposed to be. Or, and this happens too, the certificate itself is expired. Any of these are immediate red flags. So what happens when you miss something at that checkpoint? What are the real, tangible consequences of letting a non-compliant part slip through the cracks? Well, these are the most common mistakes we see happen over and over again. A supplier sends a perfectly good UL-listed pump, but the project spec demanded FM. A UL-only valve gets installed in an area that absolutely requires FM. Or it's simple paperwork mistakes, like a mismatched model number or an expired certificate. Every one of these breaks that critical chain of compliance. And the immediate result of breaking that chain is this: rejected. It's just one word, but it brings work to a screeching halt, it costs a lot of money, and it can throw your whole project timeline into chaos. You see, a rejection is never just one problem. It starts a domino effect. First, a non-conformance report, an NCR, gets issued. Then you've got the cost of ripping out the old material and buying the new stuff. That, of course, leads to major project delays, which can trigger financial penalties. Then you've got disputes with the client's insurer. And the worst part? It creates huge legal exposure for you and your company if a fire ever actually happens. And that brings us to our final, and honestly our most important point: your personal and professional responsibility in this whole process. This goes way beyond just getting the project signed off and handed over. At the end of the project, at handover, you're going to submit this package of documents. This is your proof that you did everything right. It has to include the final drawings, all the test reports, and, critically, all the valid UL and FM certificates for the equipment you installed. This package is basically your professional signature, saying this facility was built to spec and is ready to be insured. And let's be crystal clear about this, because this is the one thing you need to remember. If you sign off on UL-only equipment when the contract demanded FM, you're not just making a small technical mistake. You are personally taking on the legal, technical, and insurance liability for that decision. That's a risk that doesn't pop up during commissioning. It shows up after a disaster, when it is far, far too late. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about on your next job. When you sign that final acceptance certificate, ask yourself, is this system just installed, or is it truly insured? Is it actually protected against a real-world disaster? Because the difference lies in that little FM diamond.